Step away from the vehicle now. I know you didn't buy this car. The words cut through the Saturday afternoon air like a blade. Officer Derek Mitchell's hand rested on his holster as he stared down at the woman beside the pristine 1967 Mustang. Keisha Washington, dressed in jeans and a simple blazer, slowly raised her hands. Around them, shoppers stopped. Phones emerged. A circle formed. "Place your hands on the hood," Mitchell barked, his voice carrying across the upscale shopping district parking lot. "This vehicle matches a stolen car report." Keisha's designer handbag slid from her shoulder as she complied. Through the car window, a leather portfolio lay on the passenger seat, its official seal barely visible beneath scattered papers. The crowd grew larger. The cameras rolled. Have you ever been judged by the color of your skin rather than the content of your character, even when you held more power than those judging you? 10 minutes until courthouse security realizes Judge Washington is missing from the emergency judicial conference. Officer Mitchell circled the Mustang like a predator studying prey. His 12 years on the force had taught him to spot inconsistencies. A black woman in casual clothes driving a car worth more than most people's annual salary? The math didn't add up in his mind. "This vehicle's worth more than you make in 5 years, he said, his voice loud enough for the growing crowd to hear. "So let's start with the truth." 20 feet away, college student Amara Johnson held her phone steady, live streaming to her TikTok followers. The viewer count climbed: 847, 1,203, 2,456. Comments flooded the screen faster than she could read them. "Officer, I can explain," Keisha began, her voice calm despite the humiliation burning in her chest. "No, ma'am." Mitchell's hand moved to his radio. "You'll explain to the detectives. Right now, I need to see registration, insurance, and proof of purchase for this vehicle." The crowd pressed closer. Some filmed openly while others pretended to shop, their eyes locked on the unfolding drama. Keisha noticed an elderly black woman pushing through the gathering, recognition flickering across her weathered face. "That's not—" the woman started. "Step back, ma'am," Mitchell warned without looking away from Keisha. "This is police business." Keisha's phone buzzed against her hip, Chief Justice calling. She couldn't answer, not with her hands still pressed against the warm metal of her father's restored car, the same car she'd driven to countless family barbecues, the one that carried his memory in every pristine detail. "I'm going to need you to empty your pockets," Mitchell continued. His backup should arrive soon. Saturday afternoons in this district usually meant simple shoplifting calls, but this felt bigger. This felt like the kind of arrest that made careers. "Officer Mitchell." Keisha read his name tag with deliberate precision. "Badge number 4847. I need you to understand." "What I understand," he interrupted, "is that you're stalling. People who belong with cars like this don't act nervous around the police." The live stream viewer count hit 8,932. Amara's phone battery showed 34%, but she couldn't stop recording. This was the kind of content that changed everything. The real-life stories that exposed the truth about racial profiling in America. Through the Mustang's window, Keisha's leather portfolio caught the afternoon sunlight. A first-class boarding pass from her recent conference in Washington, D.C., protruded from its side pocket. Next to it, barely visible, lay an expired VIP courthouse parking permit from her previous vehicle. Her phone buzzed again. Emergency conference. Landmark civil rights case. Her vote was needed. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one more time," Mitchell said, his patience theatrical for the cameras. "How did you come to possess this vehicle?" "It belonged to my father," Keisha replied. "Judge Robert Washington." Mitchell's expression didn't change. Names meant nothing without proof, and proof was exactly what he intended to demand. "Anyone can claim anything. I need documentation." The crowd murmured. Someone whispered, "Judge Washington," and heads turned. The elderly woman tried again to step forward, but other bystanders held her back, unwilling to escalate the situation. "Officer," A mall security guard approached, his radio crackling. "Is everything under control here?" "Just processing a potential vehicle theft," Mitchell replied. "Calling for backup to assist with the search." Search. The word hit the crowd like electricity. Phones emerged from purses and pockets. The circle widened but tightened simultaneously, as if everyone understood they were witnessing something significant. Keisha's briefcase sat in the back seat, its state Supreme Court seal facing away from the windows. Inside lay documents that could end this humiliation instantly, but reaching for them now would only escalate Mitchell's suspicions. Her phone buzzed a third time. She closed her eyes briefly, calculating. 10 minutes until her absence became a crisis. 10 minutes until a crucial vote on police accountability measures proceeded without the swing judge. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Backups en route," Mitchell announced to his radio, requesting a supervisor for potential vehicle recovery. Amara's live stream hit 12,847 viewers. Comments exploded across her screen. "This is disgusting! Why won't someone help her? Where is this happening? Someone call the news." The elderly woman finally broke free from the crowd. "Officer, that woman is—" "Ma'am, final warning. Step back or you'll be arrested for interfering with police business." Keisha watched the woman retreat, defeated in her eyes. Everyone who might recognize her, courthouse staff, fellow attorneys, legal clerks, were either at the emergency conference or avoiding weekend shopping. She was alone, surrounded by strangers whose phones captured every humiliating second. Mitchell keyed his radio again. "Unit 47 requesting additional backup for vehicle search. The suspect is non-compliant, and the crowd is growing hostile." Non-compliant. Hostile. The words would appear in his report, shaping the narrative before truth had a chance to emerge. Keisha understood the power of language, the way it could transform a victim into a perpetrator with careful selection. Minutes remaining. Her portfolio lay just inches away, containing everything needed to end this nightmare. But reaching for it meant sudden movement, meant escalation, meant risking the very confrontation her judicial training taught her to avoid. So she waited, hands on the hood, cameras rolling, power hidden in plain sight. Minutes until courthouse security realizes Judge Washington is missing. The wail of sirens cut through the Saturday shopping buzz. 2 patrol cars rounded the corner, their blue lights painting the crowd in strobing shadows. Sergeant Reynolds emerged from the first vehicle, his 23 years of experience evident in his measured approach. "What have we got, Mitchell?" Reynolds surveyed the scene. The pristine Mustang, the well-dressed woman with her hands on the hood, the crowd of phone-wielding witnesses. "Possible vehicle theft," Mitchell replied, puffing his chest. "The subject claims the car belonged to her father but can't provide adequate documentation." Reynolds studied Keisha more carefully. Something felt off about Mitchell's assessment, but protocol demanded support for an officer in the field. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to step away from the vehicle while we conduct our investigation." Amara's live stream exploded to 23,047 viewers. Her phone battery dropped to 28%, but she couldn't stop recording. The comments section moved too fast to read, but she caught fragments. #racial profiling, #Black Lives Matter, #justice. For Judge Washington. Wait. Judge Washington. Officer Janet Torres emerged from the second patrol car, her 5 years on the force making her cautious about high-profile situations. She immediately began crowd control, establishing a perimeter while documenting the scene with her body camera. "Sir, we need to maintain order here," Torres told Reynolds. "This crowd is getting agitated, and we have the media arriving." Indeed, a local news van had turned into the parking lot, its satellite dish extended. Reporter Jennifer Martinez emerged, her camera operator close behind, drawn by the social media buzz already trending across multiple platforms. In the crowd, the elderly woman, Mrs. Dorothy Hayes, pulled out her own phone. Her arthritic fingers moved slowly across the screen, searching for the courthouse directory. She knew that face, knew those calm, intelligent eyes. 40 years of working in the legal system had taught her to recognize power, even when it wore casual clothes. "Officers," Keisha said, her voice carrying the authority she used in courtrooms daily. "I understand your concerns, but I need to make a phone call. This is creating a significant misunderstanding." "No phone calls until we complete our investigation," Mitchell snapped. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back." The crowd stirred. Someone shouted, "She's not resisting!" Another voice called out, "This is harassment!" A teenager with purple hair live-streamed from another angle, adding to the digital documentation of the encounter. Reynolds raised his hand for quiet. His radio crackled with dispatch updates. Domestic disturbance on 5th Street. Possible break-in at the electronics store. Saturday afternoons were busy, and this situation was consuming too many resources. "Look," Reynolds said, his tone more reasonable than Mitchell's. "If you can provide registration and insurance, we can clear this up quickly." Keisha's phone buzzed again. Chief Justice calling for the 4th time. 5 minutes remaining. "The documents are in my briefcase," she said carefully. "In the back seat." Mitchell moved toward the car. "I'll retrieve them for evidence." "That briefcase contains confidential legal documents," Keisha said sharply. "You cannot—" "Ma'am, if you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't object to a search." The legal implications hit Keisha like a physical blow. Attorney-client privilege, sealed case files, judicial confidentiality agreements. Her briefcase contained documents that could compromise ongoing cases, violate ethics rules, and potentially mistrial active proceedings. "Officer, I'm invoking my 4th Amendment rights. You cannot search my vehicle or personal effects without a warrant or probable cause." Mitchell's smile was cold. "Probable cause? How about suspected vehicle theft?" Mall security supervisor Carlos Rodriguez approached the scene, his 10 years of retail security experience telling him this situation was beyond his pay grade. "Officers, mall management are concerned about the disruption to business. How long will this take?" "As long as necessary," Mitchell replied curtly. "We're conducting a criminal investigation." Torres whispered to Reynolds, "Sarge, the live streams are going viral. We've got over 40,000 people watching this online." Reynolds felt the weight of scrutiny. Modern policing meant every action faced immediate public judgment. One wrong move could destroy careers, spark protests, or trigger federal investigations. In the crowd, Mrs. Hayes finally found what she was looking for. Her face lit up as she recognized the photo on the courthouse website. The Honorable Judge Keisha Washington, Superior Court. She pushed forward again, but the crowd had grown to over 200 people. "Officer, that woman is Judge Keisha Washington of the Superior Court," Mrs. Hayes called out, her voice carrying decades of courthouse authority. Mitchell paused, handcuffs halfway to Keisha's wrists. "Ma'am, please step back." "I worked in the courthouse for 40 years, Mrs. Hayes continued. "I know Judge Washington. Her father was Judge Robert Washington. He drove this exact car for 20 years. Reynolds looked between Mrs. Hayes and Keisha, doubt creeping into his expression. Torres activated her radio, requesting a supervisor and additional backup for crowd control. Amara's phone showed 45,678 viewers. Comments flooded in from across the country as the hashtag #JudgeWashington began trending. Local news stations picked up the feed, amplifying the reach exponentially. This is Jennifer Martinez, Channel 7 News, coming to you live from Northbrook Shopping Center, where a traffic stop has drawn significant attention and raised questions about racial profiling. The situation was spiraling beyond Mitchell's control, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. 3 years from retirement, with a record that included 18 excessive force complaints and 2 federal lawsuits settled quietly by the city. This arrest could redeem his reputation or destroy it entirely. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for failure to provide proper vehicle identification and obstruction of justice," Mitchell announced, producing handcuffs. "Obstruction?" Reynolds questioned. "Tom, maybe we should—" "She's been evasive from the beginning," Mitchell interrupted. Turn around. The crowd erupted. Phones captured every angle as Keisha slowly turned, her dignity intact despite the humiliation. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Sometimes the law fails us, baby girl, but we never fail the law. Mitchell's radio crackled. All units be advised. Courthouse security reports Judge Keisha Washington is missing from the emergency session. All patrol units should be alert for possible emergencies or kidnapping. The color drained from Mitchell's face. Reynolds grabbed his radio. Dispatch Unit 23. Can you provide a description of the missing judge? African-American female, 45 years old, approximately 5'6". Last seen wearing jeans and dark blazer, driving a blue 1967 Ford Mustang, license plate JRW 1967. Reynolds looked at the car. JRW 1967. Judge Robert Washington, 1967.3 minutes remaining. The pieces clicked into place. The confident demeanor, legal knowledge, the careful word choices. Reynolds had testified in Judge Washington's courtroom dozens of times over the past 5 years. Without the formal robes and elevated bench, he hadn't recognized her. Tom, Reynolds said quietly, I think we need to— I don't care who she claims to be, Mitchell snarled, but his voice wavered. Proper procedure demands— Keisha's phone rang again. This time she could see the caller ID through her pocket. Chief Justice Margaret Thompson. Emergency conference. Landmark case. Her vote needed to break a 4-4 tie on new police accountability measures. The irony was perfect. Officers, she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had commanded courtrooms for 15 years. I'm going to reach for my identification now. You can watch my hands, you can follow protocol, but this ends here. Mitchell raised his handcuffs again. Ma'am, do not reach for anything. Let her, Reynolds said firmly. Step back, Tom. The crowd held its breath. 53,000 viewers watched Amara's live stream. The news camera rolled. Mrs. Hayes smiled with satisfaction. Minutes remaining. Keisha reached slowly toward her briefcase, her movements deliberate and visible. Her fingers found the leather portfolio, pulled it free, and flipped it open. The moment of truth had arrived. Minutes remaining. The leather portfolio opened with a soft snap that seemed to echo across the silent parking lot. Inside, nestled against cream-colored legal documents, lay a judicial identification card bearing the seal of the Superior Court of California. Judge Keisha Washington, Superior Court, Criminal Division. The silence stretched like a held breath. 53,000 viewers watched through Amara's live stream as Officer Mitchell's face transformed from confident authority to dawning horror. The judicial ID caught the afternoon sunlight, its official seal unmistakable to anyone who'd spent time in courtrooms. Officer Mitchell, Keisha said, her voice carrying the quiet power that had commanded respect in legal chambers for 15 years. Badge number 4847. I am Judge Keisha Washington of the Superior Court, Criminal Division. The crowd erupted, not in anger, but in stunned recognition. The elderly Mrs. Hayes clasped her hands together, vindication written across her weathered features. Amara's phone nearly slipped from her trembling fingers as comments exploded across her screen faster than the eye could follow. Oh my God. She's a judge. That cop is done. This is insane. Reynolds stepped forward, his 23 years of experience telling him this situation had just become a career-defining moment for all the wrong reasons. Your Honor, we had no idea. Of course you didn't, Keisha replied, closing the portfolio with deliberate precision. Because you saw a black woman with an expensive car and made assumptions based on prejudice rather than evidence. Mitchell stood frozen, his handcuffs still dangling from his right hand. The mathematical certainty that had driven his actions, black woman plus expensive car equals theft, crumbled under the weight of reality. This wasn't just any judge, this was the Judge Washington. The one whose courtroom he'd testified in 17 times over his career. The one who'd questioned his tactics, his reports, his credibility. This vehicle, Keisha continued, her voice gaining strength, belonged to my father, Judge Robert Washington, who served this county for 32 years, the same courthouse where I now preside, the same building where your department sends officers to testify under oath. She reached into the portfolio again, producing a second document. This is the vehicle's registration, clearly showing transfer from Robert Washington's estate to Keisha Washington, dated 18 months ago. This is what you would have seen if you'd approached this situation with professionalism instead of prejudice. Reporter Jennifer Martinez pushed closer with her camera crew, recognizing the magnitude of the story unfolding. Your Honor, can you comment on this encounter? I can comment on the systematic failure of training that leads to racial profiling, Keisha replied, never taking her eyes off Mitchell. I can comment on the violation of my Fourth Amendment rights. I can comment on the public humiliation of a sitting judge based solely on the color of my skin. The live stream viewers climbed past 60,000. News outlets across the state began picking up the feed. Judge Washington trended nationally within minutes, joining hashtag racial profiling and hashtag police accountability in the social media stratosphere. Torres approached cautiously, her body camera capturing every word. Your Honor, we sincerely apologize for this misunderstanding. This wasn't a misunderstanding, Officer Torres, Keisha interrupted. A misunderstanding is when you get directions wrong. This was profiling. This was prejudice. This was the systematic assumption that a black woman couldn't legitimately own something of value. Mitchell finally found his voice, though it emerged as barely more than a whisper. Judge Washington, I was following protocol. Protocol? Keisha's eyebrows rose with the same expression she used when questioning dubious testimony. Your protocol includes assuming vehicle theft based on racial demographics? Your protocol includes refusing to allow someone to provide identification? Your protocol includes threatening arrest for exercising constitutional rights? She pulled out her phone, showing the 17 missed calls from Chief Justice Thompson. While you've been conducting this investigation, I've missed votes on landmark cases. The emergency judicial conference I was required to attend has proceeded without the swing vote on police accountability measures designed to prevent exactly this type of encounter. The irony hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Mitchell's actions had directly impacted legislation designed to reform police behavior. The officer who profiled a judge had influenced judicial decisions about profiling. Ma'am. Your Honor. Reynolds struggled with the transition from suspect to authority figure. What can we do to... What you can do, Keisha said, producing a small digital recorder from her blazer pocket, is understand that I've been documenting this entire encounter for potential legal proceedings. Mitchell's face went ashen. You were recording? As is my right under California Penal Code Section 148G, she replied. Citizens are permitted to record police encounters in public spaces. Judges, particularly, have a responsibility to document potential civil rights violations. The crowd pressed closer, sensing the tide turning. Mrs. Hayes stepped forward boldly now, her courthouse authority restored. Officer Mitchell, I tried to tell you who she was. 40 years I worked in that courthouse, and I know Judge Washington. You wouldn't listen. Ma'am, we appreciate... Torres began. No, Mrs. Hayes interrupted. You don't appreciate anything. You saw a black woman and assumed criminality. In my 40 years of courthouse service, I've watched this same prejudice destroy careers, ruin lives, and undermine justice. Amara's livestream commentary had evolved from shocked observations to real-time analysis. Y'all, this is what systemic racism looks like. This is why we need police reform. This judge was getting arrested for driving her father's car while black. The viewer count hit 75,000. Major news networks began reaching out to Amara for permission to use her footage. The story was becoming national before Mitchell had even processed what was happening. Keisha opened her briefcase fully, revealing additional documents that made Mitchell's stomach drop. legal briefs on police misconduct cases, civil rights violation precedents, constitutional law interpretations. This wasn't just any judge. This was a judge who specialized in the exact type of case his actions had just created. "Officer Mitchell," she said, her voice carrying the weight of judicial authority. "In my 15 years on the bench, I've seen hundreds of cases involving police misconduct. I've studied racial profiling statistics extensively. I've sentenced officers for civil rights violations." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "Your precinct, specifically, has a 23% higher stop rate for black drivers compared to county averages. Your personal record includes 18 excessive force complaints and 2 federal lawsuits settled by the city." Mitchell's knees nearly buckled. How did she know? How could she access those records? "I know these statistics," Keisha continued, "because I chair the Judicial Committee on Police Accountability. I review departmental data quarterly. I make recommendations for policy changes. I approve settlement agreements for civil rights violations." The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. Mitchell hadn't just profiled a random judge. He'd profiled the judge responsible for overseeing police reform in the county, the judge who would determine his department's future policies, the judge who could influence his career, his pension, his legacy. "This encounter will become a case study," Keisha said matter-of-factly. "It will be analyzed in police academies, law schools, and civil rights seminars. It will demonstrate the intersection of racial bias and abuse of authority." Rodriguez, the mall security supervisor, had called his corporate headquarters. The parking lot incident was already viral, and management needed damage control strategies. The shopping center would face scrutiny about their security policies, their relationship with local police, their response to discrimination. Minute remaining. Keisha's phone rang again. Chief Justice Thompson calling for the 19th time. The emergency conference couldn't wait any longer. Democracy demanded decisions, even when judges were being profiled in parking lots. "I need to take this call," Keisha announced. "The Chief Justice requires my vote on cases that will affect civil rights legislation statewide." She answered the phone, her voice immediately shifting to professional formality. "Chief Justice Thompson, this is Judge Washington. I apologize for my absence, but I've been detained by police while attempting to return to chambers." The conversation was audible to those nearby. Thompson's voice carried concern, authority, and barely contained anger. Within minutes, the Chief Justice had contacted the police commissioner directly. The chain of command that governed law enforcement was mobilizing. Mitchell's radio crackled. "Unit 47, return to station immediately for conference with Commissioner Hayes." Commissioner Hayes. Mrs. Dorothy Hayes's son. The elderly woman who'd tried to help now smiled with the satisfaction of 40 years in the legal system. She'd watched justice delayed, but rarely justice denied. "Officer Mitchell," Keisha said, ending her call, "you have a choice to make. You can learn from this encounter and become part of the solution, or you can continue the same patterns that brought us to this moment." She retrieved her judicial robe from the briefcase, the final symbol that transformed the situation completely. The black fabric with its red trim represented authority, justice, and the rule of law that Mitchell had sworn to serve. "This robe," she said, holding it up for the cameras, "represents 15 years of service to justice. It represents every case I've heard, every sentence I've issued, every constitutional right I've protected." The crowd fell silent. Even the live stream comments paused as viewers absorbed the symbolic power of the moment. "When you profiled me today, you didn't just profile Keisha Washington. You profiled the justice system itself. You profiled the constitutional principles we've all sworn to defend." Mitchell's career flashed before his eyes. 3 years to retirement, pension benefits, healthcare coverage. Everything that had motivated his service now hung in the balance because of 30 minutes of prejudice. But Keisha wasn't finished. There was one more revelation, one final piece of the puzzle that would complete the story and change everything. "Officer Mitchell," she said, her voice carrying the quiet power that made courtrooms fall silent. There's something else you should know about this situation. Something that makes your actions even more significant than you realize. The crowd leaned forward. The cameras focused. The live stream viewers held their collective breath. The final secret was about to be revealed. Officer Mitchell, Keisha continued, her voice cutting through the parking lot tension like a blade. The emergency judicial conference I missed today? We were voting on case number 2024 CR 8847, your federal civil rights lawsuit. Mitchell's face went white. The case he'd tried to forget, hoped would disappear in legal bureaucracy, had been sitting on Judge Washington's docket. The woman he'd just humiliated held his professional future in her hands. The plaintiff, Angela Rodriguez, alleged you profiled her during a traffic stop 18 months ago. Sound familiar? Keisha's voice carried the precision of 15 years in criminal law. Same shopping district, same assumptions, same pattern of behavior. The live stream exploded past 90,000 viewers. Amara's hands shook as she held her phone steady, understanding she was documenting legal history in real time. The comments section became a blur of outrage, support, and disbelief. Reynolds stepped forward, his 23 years of experience telling him this situation required immediate damage control. Your Honor, Officer Mitchell was following department protocol. Protocol? Keisha opened her briefcase again, producing a thick document bound in blue covers. California Penal Code Section 135 prohibits discrimination by law enforcement based on race, color, or national origin. Your protocol violates state law. She flipped through pages with the efficiency of someone who'd memorized constitutional law. Furthermore, under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983, Officer Mitchell's actions constitute a federal civil rights violation. The financial liability alone could exceed $2.3 million based on recent settlement precedents in the Ninth Circuit. Torres activated her radio, requesting immediate supervisory presence. This had evolved beyond a simple misunderstanding into a potential federal case with massive financial implications for the department. Your Honor, Reynolds said carefully, what would it take to resolve this situation? Keisha smiled, the same expression she used when attorneys asked poorly constructed legal questions. Sergeant Reynolds, you're asking a sitting judge to negotiate her own civil rights violation? That's not how the justice system works. The crowd pressed closer. Mrs. Hayes stepped forward, her courthouse authority fully restored. Judge Washington, in my 40 years of legal service, I've never seen such blatant disregard for basic human dignity. Mrs. Hayes is correct, Keisha replied. But this isn't about dignity alone. This is about systematic failure that requires systematic solutions. She turned to address the cameras directly, understanding that her words would reach millions beyond the parking lot crowd. Officer Mitchell represents a pattern of behavior that undermines public trust in law enforcement. According to Department of Justice statistics, Black drivers are 31% more likely to be stopped and 44% more likely to be searched, despite being 26% less likely to possess contraband. Mitchell found his voice, though it emerged weakened by the weight of evidence against him. Judge Washington, I made an error in judgment. An error? Keisha's eyebrows rose with judicial skepticism. Officer, you threatened to arrest me for exercising my Fourth Amendment rights. You assumed criminal activity based solely on racial demographics. You ignored witness testimony from Mrs. Hayes. You refused to allow me to provide identification. These aren't errors, they're constitutional violations. The mall security supervisor, Rodriguez, approached with his corporate attorney on speakerphone. The shopping center faced potential liability for hosting discriminatory police actions on their property. Insurance companies were already being contacted. Your Honor, the attorney's voice crackled through the phone. Northbrook Shopping Center deeply regrets this incident and wants to cooperate fully with any investigation. Cooperation requires action, not apologies, Keisha replied. This mall's security policies allowed racial profiling to occur on private property. Your liability extends beyond this incident to every discriminatory action your security staff witnessed and failed to prevent. She produced another document, a legal brief on premises liability for civil rights violations. Under California Civil Code Section 51.7, businesses can be held liable for discriminatory acts occurring on their property when they fail to take corrective action. The corporate attorney went silent. Shopping centers across the state would need to review their security protocols, train their staff, and implement anti-discrimination policies to avoid similar liability. Commissioner Hayes arrived with sirens blaring. Mrs. Dorothy Hayes' son, carrying 30 years of law enforcement leadership and a reputation for accountability. His first sight was his mother standing vindicated in the crowd while his officers faced a career-ending scandal. Judge Washington, Commissioner Hayes approached with the respect due to judicial authority, I apologize for this unconscionable violation of your rights and dignity. Commissioner, your apology is noted, but accountability requires more than words, Keisha replied. Officer Mitchell's pattern of behavior suggests systematic training failures that endanger both community trust and departmental liability. She opened to a specific page in her legal brief. Your department's insurance carrier, Municipal Risk Management, has paid $847,000 in racial profiling settlements over the past 3 years. Officer Mitchell personally accounts for $312,000 of that liability. Commissioner Hayes' jaw tightened. Insurance costs were crushing police budgets statewide. Departments that couldn't control civil rights violations faced skyrocketing premiums or policy cancellations. What specific remedies are you seeking, Your Honor? Commissioner Hayes asked, understanding that judicial recommendations carried the weight of legal precedent. Keisha closed her briefcase, her decision made. Officer Mitchell has 3 options, and this choice will determine not only his career, but the trajectory of police reform in this county. The parking lot fell silent. 96,000 viewers watched the live stream as a sitting judge delivered what amounted to a legal ultimatum to law enforcement. Option 1. Officer Mitchell submits to immediate suspension pending federal investigation under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983. He faces potential criminal charges, civil liability, and permanent termination. This option protects his constitutional right to due process while acknowledging the severity of his actions. Mitchell's legs nearly gave out. Criminal charges meant prison time, loss of pension, destruction of his family's financial security. Option 2. Officer Mitchell accepts voluntary demotion, completes 200 hours of bias training, and serves as a case study for police academy reforms. He testifies before the state legislature about the dangers of racial profiling and becomes an advocate for change. This option allows redemption through education and service. The crowd murmured. Second chances were rare in cases of civil rights violations, but transformation through accountability offered hope for systematic change. Option 3. Officer Mitchell retires immediately with full benefits, acknowledging that his mindset represents outdated policing that has no place in modern law enforcement. He avoids criminal prosecution, but forfeits any future role in law enforcement or security services. Commissioner Hayes understood the political implications. Option 3 protected the department from federal investigation while removing a problematic officer. Option 2 provided educational value but risked public criticism. Option 1 guaranteed negative publicity but demonstrated accountability. Officer Mitchell, Keisha said, her voice carrying the authority that had decided thousands of legal cases, you have 60 seconds to choose. Your decision will be binding and immediately effective. The countdown began. Not the emergency conference timing that had driven the earlier urgency, but a final moment of choice that would define careers, policies, and precedents. Mitchell looked at his hands, still holding the handcuffs he'd planned to use on a sitting judge. His 18 excessive force complaints, his federal lawsuits, his pattern of behavior that had led to this moment of reckoning. He began, his voice breaking. Reynolds placed a hand on Mitchell's shoulder. Tom, think about your family. Think about your future. Torres activated her body camera, ensuring every word was recorded for legal proceedings and training purposes. The live stream viewers held their collective breath. Comments slowed as 98,000 people waited for a decision that would impact police accountability across the nation. Mrs. Hayes smiled with the satisfaction of 4 decades in the justice system. Her son, the commissioner, maintained professional composure while privately acknowledging his mother's vindication. Keisha waited with the patience of judicial experience. 15 years of hearing confessions, pleas, and excuses had taught her to recognize the moment when someone faced the truth about their actions. 30 seconds remaining, she announced. Mitchell's career, his pension, his family's future, everything balanced on the choice between accountability and consequence. The mathematics that had driven his prejudice now demanded a different kind of calculation. The moment of decision had arrived. I choose option 2, Mitchell said, his voice barely audible above the crowd's murmur. I'll accept the demotion, complete the training, and testify about what I did wrong. The parking lot erupted in surprised discussions. 104,000 live stream viewers witnessed a police officer choosing accountability over self-preservation. Comments flooded Amara's screen faster than anyone could read. He actually chose accountability. This is historic. Real change happening live. Judge Washington nodded with the measured approval she reserved for defendants who accepted responsibility. Officer Mitchell, your choice demonstrates the possibility of growth through accountability. However, this agreement requires immediate implementation and measurable outcomes. Commissioner Hayes stepped forward, his authority as police leader now aligned with judicial oversight. Judge Washington, I'll personally oversee Officer Mitchell's compliance with these terms. This incident will trigger a department-wide review of training protocols and accountability measures. Commissioner, your commitment is noted, Keisha replied, producing a final document from her briefcase. This is a memorandum of understanding I drafted during our conversation. It outlines specific reforms your department will implement within 90 days. She handed copies to Commissioner Hayes, the news media, and Amara for the live stream audience. The document detailed concrete changes that would prevent future incidents. Mandatory body cameras for all traffic stops, with footage reviewed by civilian oversight boards. The technology existed. Implementation required only administrative will and budgetary allocation of $2.3 million annually. Every stop would be recorded, every interaction documented, every officer held accountable for their conduct. Quarterly bias training for all officers, conducted by community organizations and civil rights experts. Training would include real-world scenarios, cultural competency, and de-escalation techniques specifically designed to address racial profiling. Cost? $450,000 per quarter, but invaluable for community trust. Data transparency requirements, mandating monthly public reports on traffic stop demographics. Statistics would be analyzed by race, location, and officer to identify patterns of discriminatory behavior before they escalated to civil rights violations. The public would have access to real numbers, real accountability. Community Oversight Board with subpoena power to investigate misconduct complaints. Civilian review would include community members, legal experts, and civil rights advocates with authority to compel testimony and evidence. No more internal investigations that protected problematic officers. These reforms, Keisha explained to the cameras, represent evidence-based solutions to systematic problems. They're not punitive measures against law enforcement. They're professional standards that protect both community rights and officer careers. Torres, who had documented the entire encounter through her body camera, stepped forward. Your Honor, speaking as a younger officer, I support these changes. None of us joined law enforcement to violate people's rights. We need better training and clearer guidelines. Her statement resonated through the crowd and across the live stream. A police officer publicly supporting reform demonstrated the possibility of change from within the system. The viewer count climbed past 135,000 as news networks amplified the story. Mall supervisor Rodriguez approached with his corporate attorney still on speakerphone. Judge Washington, Northbrook Shopping Center commits to implementing similar oversight measures for our security protocols. We'll establish bias reporting systems and mandatory training for all staff within 60 days. The private sector accountability surprised many observers. Businesses rarely volunteered for additional regulation, but the legal liability and public relations risks made compliance preferable to resistance. Corporate America was watching, learning, adapting. Mrs. Hayes stepped forward, her 40 years of courthouse experience lending weight to her words. Judge Washington, I want to thank you for handling this situation with the dignity and wisdom your father would have admired. Judge Robert Washington would be proud. The mention of her father brought visible emotion to Keisha's composed demeanor. Mrs. Hayes, my father taught me that justice delayed is justice denied, but justice achieved through education is justice that endures. This parking lot will become a classroom for change. Reynolds gathered Mitchell's equipment, badge, radio, service weapon, symbols of authority that would be returned only after completion of the agreed terms. The demotion was immediate and visible, demonstrating consequences for constitutional violations. Officer Mitchell, Keisha said, her judicial authority now tempered with compassion, your choice today begins a difficult journey. Bias training isn't punishment. It's education about unconscious prejudices we all carry. Your testimony before the legislature will help other officers avoid similar mistakes. Mitchell nodded, understanding that his career's lowest moment could become its most meaningful contribution. Judge Washington, I'm sorry. I was wrong about everything. About you, about the assumptions I made, about what policing should be. Apologies matter, but actions matter more, she replied. Your testimony will reach thousands of officers in training. Your story will become part of police academy curricula nationwide. That's how individual accountability creates systemic change. The live stream reached 142,000 viewers as news networks began broadcasting the resolution. #Judge Washington trended alongside #police reform and #accountability matters across all social media platforms. The black stories that emerged from this encounter would inspire touching stories of transformation. Commissioner Hayes addressed the cameras directly. This incident demonstrates both the problem and the solution. Officer Mitchell's actions were unacceptable, but his choice to accept accountability shows that change is possible. Our department will implement every reform Judge Washington has outlined. The crowd began to disperse, understanding they had witnessed something historic. Real-life stories like this one changed legislation, changed training, changed hearts and minds across the nation. This parking lot, Judge Washington said, looking around at the scene that had transformed from humiliation to education, will be remembered not for the prejudice that occurred here, but for the reforms that emerged from confronting that prejudice directly. The mathematical certainty that had driven Mitchell's prejudice had been replaced by a different equation. Individual accountability plus systematic reform equals sustainable change. 6 months later, the ripple effects of that Saturday afternoon continued to transform communities across the nation. Officer Mitchell completed his 200-hour bias training program, becoming the first law enforcement officer in California history to voluntarily testify before the state legislature about his own misconduct. His emotional testimony about unconscious bias and the dangers of racial profiling helped pass Senate Bill 1619, the Police Accountability and Community Trust Act. I saw a black woman with an expensive car and assumed criminality, Mitchell told lawmakers, his voice steady despite the weight of confession. I nearly destroyed my career and violated the constitutional rights of a sitting judge because of prejudices I didn't even know I carried. The legislation mandated statewide implementation of body cameras, bias training, and civilian oversight boards. 37 other states introduced similar bills, creating a national movement toward police accountability that began in a shopping center parking lot. Judge Washington established the Robert Washington Foundation for Judicial Excellence, providing mentorship and scholarships for young black attorneys entering the legal profession. The foundation's motto, inspired by her father's teachings, became a rallying cry for justice advocates: character over color, evidence over assumption, accountability over authority. Amara Johnson's live stream footage became required viewing in police academies, law schools, and civil rights seminars nationwide. Her documentation of the encounter earned her a journalism scholarship and a position as a civil rights reporter for a major news network. The real-life stories she covered continued to expose injustice and inspire change. Mrs. Dorothy Hayes, at 73 years old, became the chairwoman of the county's first civilian police oversight board. Her 40 years of courthouse experience proved invaluable in reviewing misconduct cases and implementing accountability measures. Age gives you wisdom, she told reporters, but action gives you change. Northbrook Shopping Center installed bias reporting kiosks, established community advisory panels, and created a $500,000 annual fund for civil rights education programs. Other retail chains adopted similar measures, understanding that corporate responsibility extended beyond profit margins to community trust. The mathematical equation that had driven prejudice, black woman plus expensive car equals theft, was replaced by a new formula taught in sensitivity training sessions. Assumption plus bias equals constitutional violation. Evidence plus accountability equals justice. These touching stories of transformation proved that individual choices could create systematic change. The black stories that emerged from confronting prejudice directly became powerful tools for education and reform. Commissioner Hayes retired 2 years later, his legacy defined not by the officers who failed under his command, but by the reforms implemented to prevent future failures. His mother's vindication became his own redemption, proving that accountability could strengthen rather than weaken law enforcement. Judge Washington continued presiding over criminal cases with the additional authority that came from personal experience with civil rights violations. Her rulings on police misconduct cases carried the weight of someone who had faced prejudice and chosen justice over revenge. The 1967 Mustang still sits in her driveway, its pristine condition a testament to her father's memory and her own resilience. Every Saturday she drives it to the courthouse, remembering that dignity preserved through quiet strength creates more lasting change than anger expressed through loud confrontation. The lesson remains clear. When we witness injustice, we have a choice. We can stay silent and allow prejudice to flourish, or we can speak up and demand the accountability that creates real change. Your voice matters in this fight for justice. Share your own stories of overcoming prejudice in the comments below. Have you witnessed discrimination? How did you respond? What changes do you want to see in your community? Subscribe to Black Voices Speak for more stories of resilience, justice, and the quiet power that transforms systems from within. Hit that notification bell, because every story shared brings us closer to a world where character truly matters more than color. Together, we can ensure that the next generation inherits a justice system that protects everyone's constitutional rights, regardless of race, regardless of assumptions, regardless of the prejudices that once divided us. Justice achieved through education is justice that endures.